Today's daf is daf Kuf Aleph, and we're going to start here on daf Kuf Amud Beis, approximately 10 lines down from the top. Some of this we did yesterday, but we need it as a takeoff. Ha Gufa Kasha. So the Gemara says that there's a stira in this brisa. What's the stira, the contradiction in the brisa itself? Amrit. In the reisha of the Bryce, it says Yom Shmua ki Yom Kvura lemitzvah Shiva Ushloshim. The Bryce had divided up into three different parts. One part was Yom Kvura, the next part was Yom Shmua, and the third part was Yom Likud Atzamos. And the Bryce equated Yom Shmua to both Yom Kvura on the one hand and to Yom Likud Atzamos on the other hand. With regard to the requirement of Avelus, of Shiva and Shloshim, Yom Shmua generates the same Avelus as Yom Kvura. However, with regard to Lachilas Psachim, to eat the Korban Pesach, in a case where he buried the dead on the 14th of Nisan, there the Yom Shmua, if let's say he didn't know about the Misa and he finds out about it, and therefore he needs Avelus, is Lachilas Psachim ki Yom Likud Atzamos. It doesn't have the status of the Isra Achilas Kodshim, and in this case, the primary case is the Korban Pesach, but rather he's allowed to eat the Korban Pesach on the Laila after the Shmua. So he heard the Shmua about the death of a relative during the day, and the night afterwards is mutar be'achilas kodshim, like the case of Yom Likud Atzamos. So that's as far as the Reisha of the Brisa is concerned. V'hadar tani, but then we look into the Sefer of the Brisa, and it says Echad ze v'echad ze tovel v'ochel b'kodshim la'erev. And it seems that the Bryce is telling us that even as far as Yom Kvur is concerned, the night after Yom Kvur is mutar b'achilas kodshim, and certainly achilas Pesach. So why are you telling me no? The Yom Kvura is the night following, would be Asur b'achilas kodshim. And yet, in the Reisha, it seems that as far as Yom Shmua is concerned, there's no Isra Achilas Kodshim on the night after the Yom Shmua. Only after the Yom Kvura there would be an Isra Achilas Kodshim after the night, and yet the Brisa in the Sefer says Echad ze v'echad ze, presumably referring to even Yom Kvura, he's allowed to eat Kodshim b'layla. So what's the deal with Yom Kvura, the Laila after Yom Kvura? There seems to be a contradiction within the Brisa. According to the Reisha of the Brisa, it would seem that you would not be allowed to eat Kodshim on the night after Yom Kvura, and according to the Sefer, it would seem that you are allowed to eat Kodshim on the night following Yom Kvura. Rav Chisda Tanoihi. So we're going to have a discussion later on today, Mirz Hashem, what is the Machlokas Tanoim, in which one part of the Brisa is reflecting the sheet of one Tana, who would say that you're not allowed to eat Kodshim, not even a Korban Pesach, on the night following the Yom Kvura, and the second Brisa, second part of the Brisa, reflects the sheet of the Tanoim, that the night after Kvura is mutar b'achilas Kodshim. So that we're going to see later on. What is and where is that machlokas tanoim? Rabbi Bar Huna Omar Lo Kasha. He wants to reconcile the apparent contradiction between the Reish and the Sefer in a different way. Kan sheshama shmua al meso samach l'shkiyas achama, and the same in terms of liktu lo atzamos samach l'shkiyas achama, and the same thing with regard to the Kvura. So in these three cases, whether it's the Shmua, whether it's the Likud Atzamos, or whether it's the Kvura itself, all of it took place samuch l'shkias hachama. Now, it doesn't mean samuch l'shkias hachama immediately before shkias hachama. It means any time before shkias hachama. And in that case, the Sefer of the Brisa would allow you to eat the kodshim, allow the kohen to eat the kodshim on the night following, whether it's following the kvura, following the shmua, following the likud atzomos. The night is mutter. Why? Because everything that we're talking about in all these three permutations took place before Shkia. Vekan, but when we medayik in the reish of the brisa with regard to Yom HaKfura, that's li achar Shkia Sachama, which means that the night after Kfura, in a case where the Kfura took place after, now how could the Kfura take place after Shkia Sachama? We're talking about Pesach. And the answer is that the Goyim apparently buried the dead, right? He commissioned the Goyim to bury the dead. And all this took place after Shkias Hachama. And since it took place after Shkias Hachama, according to Allah, the day begins with Shkias Hachama. So Bishlam, in a case where, let's say, for example, the Kvura took place before Shkias Hachama, so then the following night is part of a different day, and therefore there's no Isur Achilas Kodshim. But if, on the other hand, the Kvura took place after sunset, that means we're in already the new day. That day now is the day of Kvura, which generates an Isur Achilas Kodshim. That's the way Rabbi Barav Huna reconciles the Reish and the Sefer of this brisa. The Gemara is not happy with this. If you're telling me that they brought the dead to burial after Shkias Hachama, so okay, so there's nothing really to talk about here. Whatever happened already happened. In other words, now it should be asur to eat kodshim, right? And even the Korban Pesach should be asur. So we don't say my dahava because we're dealing not with the hakrava and the question whether an onen is allowed to be makriv and do the avoda, but rather we're talking about the achilas ha-pesach. And now we're going to upgrade the status of achilas korban pesach to that of the avoda, and we're going to say that it's ma'akiv, meaning you cannot fulfill the mitzvah of havas korban pesach without the achila. The achila and the hakrova are part of one entity, and therefore what we're saying is that if the kvura took place after Shkias Hachama, which again, if it's already after Shkias Hachama, there's nothing to talk about in terms of the avodas hakorban, which has to take place before Shkia on Yudalit in the afternoon. So that's not an issue. But the issue is whether or not he's allowed to eat from the Korban Pesach. And if you tell him he's enjoined from eating from the Korban Pesach, then the entire krova is batel. Okay, so that's according to Rabbi Barav Huna. Now we go according to Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi says, let's take a second look at the Sefer of the Brisa. And we saw in the Sefer of the Brisa that it said, Echad zeh v'echad zeh tovil v'ochel kodshim ba'erev, and apparently that's referring even to the case of Yom HaKfura. And therefore we're saying that the Laila after Yom HaKfur is mutar b'achilas kodshim. No, says Rav Ashi, Mai echad zeh v'echad zeh hachi kamer. Echad Yom HaShmua v'echad Yom Likud Atzamos tovah v'yochel v'kodshim ba'erev. We're makil in these two cases, the scenarios of number one, Yom HaShmua, number two, Yom Likud Atzamos. and we don't consider them like Yom Kvura, and the Laila afterwards is Mutter B'Kodshim, is therefore Tochel V'Yochel B'Kodshim. However, with regard to the Yom HaKfura, the Yom HaKfura itself will generate an Isa Achilas Kodshim even on the Laila after the Yom HaKfura, and therefore there's no stira in the Brisa. But the Gemara says that's impossible. V'hodar Avashi Bedusa. Bedusa means it's a make-up thing. It cannot be justified. Michti. If Rav Ashi is right, that when it says in the Brisa Echad Zeh V'Echad Zeh, it's referring to Yom Shmua and Yom Likud Atzamos, Alokoi Zeh V'Zeh Mi Boile. Right? Why does it say Echad Zeh V'Echad Zeh? It seems to be saying Echad Zeh V'Echad Zeh, not referring to Zeh V'Zeh, these two specific cases, but to all three cases that are mentioned in the Brisa, including the Yom HaKfur El Shma Mino V'Dusei. Now let's get back to Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda said that the status of the Laila after Kfura, with regard to Achilas Kodshim, whether or not the Onen is allowed to eat Kodshim in the night after, is Machlokas Tanoim. So Gemara says, My Tanoim. Where do we find this Machlokas Tanoim? And who are the Tanoim that argue about it? This Sanya we learned in the Brisa, Ad Mosai Mis Onen Olav. When does the Easter Kodshim, to what extent does it kick in? Is it to what extent do we extend the Isser of Achilas Kodshim of an Onen? According to the Tanakama, Kol Hayom, the entire day. Now, if we're assuming that we're talking about Yom HaMisa, then everybody agrees that on Yom HaMisa there's an Isser Achilas Kodshim to the Onen the entire day, as we'll soon learn it from a pasuk in Amos. And the Bryce is now introducing a machlokas tanoim. So l'chora, we're not talking about Yom HaMisa, as we'll soon see in the Gemara. And Rebbe Omer calls man shalom nikbar. Rebbe seems to be makil, and he's saying that don't tell me kol hayom, the entire day is us and achilas kodshim. It's only up to the kvura. If the kvura took place midday, then for the remainder of the balance of the day, be allowed to eat kodshim. So again, we're going to have to analyze this machlokas between the Tanakama and Rebbe and see what they're talking about. But Ma'askin, what's the case? If when it says in the Tanakama, Kol Hayom, he's referring to Yom HaMisa, Mika Lesle, the Yom HaMisa, Tofas Leilam. Everybody agrees that the Yom HaMisa itself is Doraisa, as we'll soon learn it from a pasuk. And not only that, everybody agrees that the night afterwards, after the Yom HaMisa, is also prohibited in Achilas Kodshim. And the din of Isa Achilas Kodshim to an onen extends into the Laila after the Yom HaMisa. Now, whether that's Doraisa or D'Rabbanan will be a subject of our sugya. But in any event, it cannot be that Rebbe is coming to be makil on the Laila after Yom HaMisa. Everybody agrees that the Laila after Yom HaMisa is also Achilas Kodshim V'su. And furthermore, Rebbe Omer calls man Shalo Nikbar Hakvaro Ishterele. But if they buried the dead and it's on Yom HaMisa, you could be the Onen is allowed to eat Kodshim. Mi Iker de Lesle Vachrisa Biomar. Does Rebbe reject the simple derivation? Halachic derivation for the pasuk in Amos that says Vachrisa ki Yom Mar. Now, Yom Mar is the day of Misa, and Yom means the entire day, and therefore, if it's the entire day, then even if the dead was buried in the middle of the day, for sure the onen is prohibited from eating kodshim for the balance of the day. How could Rebbe say that after the kfur it's mutter? Omar Rav Sheshes, Ayom Kfurakoi. Let's switch one very important factor. The Yom that the Tanakama says is Asur, B'Achilas Kodshim, is referring not to the Yom HaMisa, because that's upgrade, as we say, that's clear and nobody could argue it's in the post, but rather it's referring to Yom HaKfura, which means that the dead, the deceased died on Sunday, but he wasn't buried until Monday. Comes along Tanakama and says that Monday, which is the Yom HaKfura, is Asur B'Achilas Kodshim. And in all likelihood, that Isur Achilas Kodshim on the Yom HaKfura is D'Rabbanan, because the Aninus Doraisa is derived from the Pasuk V'Achrisa Ki Yom Mar, which is referring to the Yom HaMisa. So now we're in Yom HaKfura. Now, if we're dealing with Aninus D'Rabbanan, and the Rabbanan were the ones who instituted this prohibition that enjoins the Kohen Onen on the Yom HaKfura, which is the second day, it's Monday, not Sunday, from Kodshim, then Rebbe could be understood. Rebbe is saying up until Kfura, meaning the Yom HaKfura is only D'Rabbanan. The Rabbanan only prohibited the Onen from Achilles Kodshim until the time of the Kfura. The balance of the day, following the Kfura, according to Rebbe, is mutter. Again, the Gemara is still assuming in this Havamina, which the Gemara is going to soon reject, that Rebbe is the Mekil, by saying that after Kfura you're allowed to eat Kodshim. Maskif Flor of Yosef, Elahad, the Katani Ashomel, Meso, Kimalake, Atzamos, right? We had this price with the threefold categories. And the second category was Yom HaShmua, and we equated Yom HaShmua with regard to Kodshim, Achilles Kodshim, with the Yom of Likud Atzamos, and therefore, Tov Elcha Kodshim Lerev, therefore, the Yom HaShmua or the Yom Likud Atzamos is also during the daylight hours, but the night following is Mutar B'Achilles Kodshim. Michlal Yom HaKfura Fil Erev Lo. But the indication here, the diuk is that on the day of Kfur itself, that was the first of the three categories, then you're not allowed to eat Kodshim Ba'erev in the night that follows the day of Kfura, is Hamani. Who could that work out with? In other words, Rav Yosef is attacking Rav Sheshes because according to Rav Sheshes, there's no Aninus on the night after Kfura. Whether it's Rebbe, who says that Aninus ends with Kfura, according to this Havamina of the Gemara, or even according to the Tanakama, it's only the Yom that's prohibited for Kodshim, but not the Laila afterwards. But we just saw a brisa that says that, according to our diuk, that if it would have been the Yom HaKfura, then the Laila afterwards would be also, meaning that only in Yom Shmua and Yom Likud Atzamos, the night afterwards is mutter, but in Yom Kfura, which is the most chamur, then the night afterwards is also. But according to Rav Sheshes, that doesn't work out, neither according to Tanakama, because according to Tanakama, it's only the Yom that's also nor, and how much more so it doesn't work out according to Rebbe, who says that even on the Yom itself, after Kfura, it's mutter. Ella, so therefore, Rav Yosef wants to offer an alternative explanation of the brisa, rejecting Rav Sheshes. Tritz, we should reinterpret the brisa in the following way: Ad Mosai Misonim Olav. And now we're going to say that according to Tanakama, it's not Kol Hayom, but it's mutter, and there's no Isur Aninus after the day terminates Balayla. Kol Osayom Vilela. We're going to add the word Vilela. Rabbi Omer calls man shelo nikbar, avol nikbar, below lelo. If the kfura took place, then there's no Isur Achilas Kodshim on the night following. And it would seem that even midrabanan there's no Isur Achilas Kodshim according to Rebbe, because again we're still working with that havamina that Rebbe is mekil, and the Chachamim are machmer, and they prohibit the onen even with regard to the night afterwards. And that was the diuk that we were died from the brisa that mechlal to be Yom HaKfura afil erev nami lo achil. And that works out beautifully according to the Chachamim, according to Rebbe. The night after the Yom HaKfura is certainly mutter. But the Gemara doesn't like it. Amru Kamei de Rabbi Yirmiyah, when the pshat of Rav Yosef was presented to Rav Yirmiyah Omer, he responded, Gavra Rabbaka Rav Yosef Lema Hachi. The premise of Rav Yosef, and he's supposed to be a Gavra Rabbah, is that Rebbe is coming to be Mekil, and he's allowing the Onein to eat Kodshim on the night after the Yom HaKvura, and that's the Kula of Rebbe. Lema de Rebbe Lekula, I'm going to prove to him from a brisa that Rebbe is the Machmir with regard to Aninus. And we're going to see that Rebbe's Chumrah goes as far as extending Aninus even for 10 days. How long does Aninus last? Says Rebbe, I'm going to extend Aninus, Kol Zman Sheinu Nikbar Afilu Mikam Ve'asar Yom, for 10 days even. After the death, the Onein becomes an Onein, and he remains an Onein for 10 days until the actual Kfura. The Chachama make him, they say, no, I don't care when the Kfura takes place. Aninus only extends for 1 day. In any event, we see clearly from this price that Rebbe is the Mekil. How could you, Rav Yosef, say that Rebbe, we see from this price that Rebbe is the Machmer. How could you, Rav Yosef, say that Rebbe is the Mekil? Ela Tritzachi. So now Rav Yirmiyah goes back to the original brisa, that he's going to change the brisa in such a way that Rebbe turns out to be the Machmir. El Tritzachi at Masai who misonin olav kol osay yom below leilo. According to Tanakama, the din of Aninus extends throughout the entire day, but it does not. Right, we're talking about the Yom HaKvura. So again, the Yom HaMisa took place on Sunday. The Misa and the Kvura took place on Monday. The Chacham say that the Isser of Kodshim for the Onein extends only till the end of the day, the end of Monday, but not beyond. And Rebbe says, Kol Zman Shelo Nikbar. Rebbe is Machmir, and he says that we're going to extend the Aninus even beyond the second day, the Yom HaKvura, even beyond the Laila, even the third day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, as long as there was no Kvura ben Nikbar. But on the day of the Kfur itself, Tofes Leilo. So the Laila after Kfura, according to Rebbe, is Osir B'Kodshim, whereas the Laila after Kfura, according to the Tanakama, is Mutter. And again, keep in mind that we're talking about Yom HaKfura on Monday, where the Misa was on Sunday, and therefore the Yom Kfura Aninus is only a rabbinic institution. And the question is, did the rabbis go as far as to prohibit and extend Aninus even to the Laila after Yom HaKfura? Rebbe says yes, and that's called Tofes Leilo, and it's also Bachil's Kodshim, whereas the Tanakama says no. Amru Kame de Rabba, de Rava, so when the interpretation of the Brisa of Rav Yirmiyah was brought to the attention of Rava, he responded by saying, Midakama Rebbe Yom Kfura Tofes Leilo Midrabanan. Okay, now let me give a few words of introduction. One thing was clear, according to everyone. No one doubts the following halachic rule. Aninus with an Isser Kodshim applies on Yom HaMisa, the day of the death. That's derived from a pasuk. What's the status of the Laila after Yom HaMisa? We're going to determine and answer this question based on the status of the Laila after Yom HaKfura. And this is based on the fact that the Rabbanon, whenever they make a Takon and an Isser, they pattern themselves after the Doraisa. And therefore, Michlal the Yom Misa Tofes Leilo Midoraisa. If Rebbe says that the Aninus of Yom Kfura, which is the Rabbanon, extends into the Laila after Kfura, then it must be that the Rabbanon, by extending it to the Laila, saw a precedent in the Doraisa of Yom Misa. That means that the Laila of following Yom Misa is an Iser Onein Doraisa. Frekta Gemara, is that really so? V'sovra Rebbe Aninus Laila Doraisa v'asanya. I have a brisa. Hein Hayom. Okay, so this pasuk Hein Hayom is going to be the subject of an entire daf of Gemara, and basically Aaron is telling Moshe that all of Moshe's arguments as to why, again, we're talking about the Yom HaKomas HaMishkan after the Shmonas Yimei HaMiluim. So let's say the Shmonas Yimei HaMiluim began on Chof Gimel Adar. We're talking about Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And there were a number of different karbonos. They were all what's called se'irim, he-goats, that were brought for three different purposes, as we'll soon see on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the day of HaKomas HaMishkan. And they burnt the soyer. They went ahead deliberately and burnt the soyer. This is after the death of Nadav Avihu. And they were owning him. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, what was the problem here with the soyer? Well, why did you burn it? Was it this? Was it that? Was it that? He goes through a whole list of possible reasons why they may have concluded that the soyer was disqualified and therefore it had to be burnt. And Aaron rejected all those arguments. He said, no, it wasn't X, it wasn't Y, it wasn't Z. None of these things happened. The reason why we had to burn the sa'ir, that chatas, on that day is because of Aninus. Or we'll see later on, according to Reb Nechemia, another Tana who says because of Tumah. So Ani Hayom Asur V'Laila Mutar. The Brisa says that because of the fact that the chatas could not be eaten by any Kohen, there was no other Kohen. There were only three Kohanim in the world at that point. Nadav Avihu had died. They were burnt. So what are we left with? We're left with Aaron and his two sons, Elazar and Itamar. And they were all owning it. So no one would eat the carbon because there was no Kohen available in the Veld who was not an Onain to eat the carbon. So therefore, Laila Mutter. Therefore, we're going to be matir the achila on the night afterwards, meaning the Laila is not osir. Now, and again, we're talking about the Laila after Yom HaMisa. And we just finished saying that the Torah prohibits for the Onain on the Laila, according to Rebbe, on the Laila following Misa to eat kachim. So how could Aaron make this statement and say Laila mutar? Lidoros bein b'yom bein b'Laila also. Lidoros, we're not going to be matir the Onain to eat kachim. We have no pressing need to do so because there are plenty of kohanim in the world. That's called Lidoros. And this is all Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says that there was a special heter for Aaron Ubana, his two sons, to eat of the chatas balayla following the Yom HaMisa, because there was no one else available other than these three onanim to eat the karba. But Lidoros, we're not going to allow any achila, according to Rabbi Yehuda, on the night after Yom HaMisa, because the Torah prohibits achilas kodshim of an onain even on the Laila. I'm sorry, even on the Laila after Yom Misa. But Rebbe says, no, Aninus Laila and Elamidivri Torah, and Elamidivri Torah, Elamidivri Sofer, that the entire Isser of Aninus in Laila, now we're talking about the Laila after Yom HaMisa. Yom HaMisa, according to everyone, as we said a million times, is Asur Ba'aninus Da'oraisa for the entire day of Yom HaMisa. According to everybody, nobody questions that. And he's not allowed to eat kosher for the entire day. But Laila afterwards, the machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rebbe, which, as we learned in the previous daf, is a machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda, between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. Anyway, machlokas about whether Laila's tfisas Laila, the Laila following the Yom HaMisa, is a doraisa or not. But Rebbe is committed in this raisa to maintain the position that the Iser of Laila liachar Yom HaMisa tfisas Yalaila is only d'Rabbanan. And how did you come to the conclusion that according to Rebbe, as we were medayek, then the Laila after the Yom HaMisa is da'orais? And we again, let's go over the diuk, because Rebbe held that the night after Yom HaKvura, which is only d'Rabbanan, is prohibited. Then certainly the Laila after Yom Misa would have been certainly according to Rebbe would have been also da'oraisa, because otherwise, how would the Rabbanan come along and invent a whole new institution, yesh me'ayin, of aninus of Yom Kfura with a Laila afterwards? It must be that on a Doraisa level on Yom Amisa, the Laila afterwards is Doraisa. But here we see in this Brisa that according to Rebbe, aninus Laila Eina Elami Divrei Sofer. It's only the Rabbanan. So we're in a brach now. We're in trouble. And the Gemara answers Liolam, the Rabbanon, who he Enochinami Rebbe holds that the aninus of the Laila after Yom HaMisa is only the Rabbanon. So now the question arises, if the entire institution of Tfisas Laila after Yom HaMisa is only the Rabbanon, and the Torah permitted the Onen Ftid Kodshim on the Laila after Yom Misa, then why did the Rabbanon go ahead and they went, l'chumra, above and beyond the Doraisa to prohibit Laila? But as we turn to Daf Kuf Aleph, let's keep in mind that the Laila after Yom HaMisa, even according to Rebbe, if we assume it's only the Torah only prohibited the Yom itself of Misa because Ki Yomar, but not the Laila after. There's no Tfisis Yom according to the Torah, but Midivrei Sofer according to Rabbanan, it would be Asur. So now what we're doing is, as we turn to the next daf, we're seeing an equation here between the Laila after Kvura, which is the Laila after Aninus Rabbanan, and the Laila after Misa, which is the Laila following Aninus Dorais. They're both prohibited midrabanan. And the Gemara says, and here we're going to start the daf for today,